All right, Dan. So like the big number is 4 with Nikola Jokic and the minimum number of weeks that he's out with this knee injury. But it originally, in the original draft of this episode, it was going to be 126.2. And you're wondering, what is that? And I have the answer for you. That is the on-court defensive rating for the Atlanta Hawks when Trae Young is on the floor. They've given up 126.2 points every 100 possessions with Trae Young on the floor, and that is the worst for any player-team combo this season. And considering that we were playing at basically historic levels of offensive efficiency, yeah, you guessed it. That is the worst on-court defensive rating for any player-team combo in NBA history for someone who's played over 200 minutes. Dude, 126. And here's the only block he's had this season. Cam Thomas driving down the floor, and Trae Young kind of swipes at him, and that's his only block. Okay?
Well,
so it is technically a block, Dan. And Cam
Sure.
Thomas, trying to make a layup, so I guess you could call that a block, but Trae Young is arguably the worst defender in the NBA. Someone who has to be hid routinely. If you look at the guys that he's guarded in NBA matchup data, he's often just standing off in the corner, just hiding. Hopefully not getting put in any too many actions. But when you got Dyson Daniels and you still are having a porous defense of 126 points every 100 possessions, I don't know what team is looking at this Trae Young player at this point in his career and saying, yeah, that we can make that work defensively. It's tough. I mean, the Hawks right now, they're in a really bad slide in the season, and I think a lot of people were high on them coming into this year, and rightfully so. Just on paper, it seems like a lot of these pieces do fit, but it's been a mess. Trae Young right now, he's been out. He's only played 10 games. In one of those games, he played less than 20 minutes. In the games that he's played 20 minutes, the Hawks are 1-8 with Trae Young. Dan, not great, Bob. Trae Young this season, and I feel like the Atlanta Hawks are going to be, trying to mix up this team, trying to shake this up. But when you got a guy like Trae Young who's so tough to hide defensively, as Jalen Brunson cooks him on this one-on-one play, there's so many of these, dude, where he's just like a matador out there and then just gives up on the play. And oftentimes he just stands there and doesn't go in for rebounds. He doesn't go and rotate over. And part of this 126 figure, Dan, seems like to me is that the team is checked out. The team is like, if Trae Young is out here, I can't possibly put out this many fires defensively. And so I just feel like Trae Young right now, even though he's an all-star, a reigning all-star, I feel like it's going to be tough to move this guy.
We've seen so often that one of the roster building, like team building challenges that a lot of organizations face, and it is part of draft evaluation, it's part of free agency and trade talks like this one. If you are building around a small guard, you got to really nail everything around that small guard, right? And that small guard has to be an absolute lights out, no doubt about it, all NBA caliber offensive engine to make it worth your while. And so like Steph Curry also is, bigger and a better participant in the team defensive structure in Golden State and has been for years. Jalen Brunson is arguably as damaging a defender as Trae Young on a lot of nights, but his level of offensive contributions has increased, at
least he takes charges, right? He'll put his
now.
body on the line to like make plays defensively, whereas Trae Young does everything in his power to stay out of the play, it seems like.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we'll execute the scheme, if nothing else. We're going to high hedge to try to turn the guy back into the defender we're trying to get the switch, make it work as best you can. So if you are in order for all this to work, it needs to be not the worst defense in the NBA, and you need to be able to elevate that offense to a top 5 level. And that was the math earlier on in Trae Young's career, right? We remember that conference finals run. That Hawks team was top 5 offense, around league average defense, similar sort of build to what they've tried to do now, where you had this, size at the rim, you had size on the wing, you had, Kevin Huerter as like a big two playing next to him. There was John Collins and DeAndre Hunter. There were size kind of everywhere on that roster, insulating him. And that was the theory of the case with this Hawks team, where you're going to have Dyson Daniels next to him. You're going to have Jalen Johnson. You're going to bring in Nickeil Alexander-Walker. You have Onyeka Okongwu there. When Kristaps Porzingis is there, you have another rim protector. So there's size all over the place. And Kristaps Porzingis has missed a lot of time, which is, I think, just about pretty much anybody could have seen, or at least it's certainly not outside the realm of possibility that he would miss a lot of time. His, recurring illness issues, which is a, concerning thing in its own right, but he just hasn't been available, right? And so you're already down the 7'3" rim protector. And it's the comparison I made last year when in like making the argument for like all defensive case for Dyson Daniels is he's like swinging a weighted bat. Like it is harder for him to be able to get the bat off his shoulder and make contact because Trae Young weighs it down. And so none of that it takes away from Trae Young as, Trae Young's floor vision, Trae Young's ability to dissect the defense, a defense in the pick and roll. But if he's also not able to shoot the ball super efficiently, which he has not, he takes a lot of super deep threes. He doesn't make a lot of super deep threes. And so if he's not contributing with the offense efficiency in that way, the Hawks have been an average offense, not elite in his minutes, and they're dropping down all the way defensively. It makes him a very, as you mentioned, a tricky player to fit into another team's, not even roster structure, or salary structure. We'll get to that, but just what that team needs to look like around him. There aren't a lot of teams that need point guards. We had one of the big sort of connect the dots parlor games a couple of years ago was, does he fit next to Wemby in San Antonio?
Yeah.
They're all good on guards right now. They found one in trade. They drafted two of them, and they're good. They're all set right now.
They're set.
And Orlando, we had talked about that, right? They go and they make their big move for Desmond Bane. They don't seem like they want to move in the direction of a ball dominant point guard. They want to sort of get their shot creation elsewhere. Hasn't worked out super great for Orlando, by the way, but neither here nor there. So you're in the situation of where are the lily pads to jump to? Where are the suitors excited about just getting him into the team, let alone at the financial situation, which heading into the season, we knew Trae Young was looking for an extension. The Hawks didn't do it. And there, by all accounts, hasn't been a whole lot of movement in that direction this season. And now the team is not good. The team has been dramatically worse in your minutes. And what's the argument for an extension now beyond he's popular with our fan base, which is not nothing. That's real. He's the best Hawk since, I'm going to say, since Joe Johnson. It's easy to say Dominique Wilkins. Let's put some respect on Joe Johnson's name here, though, by the way, 7-time All-Star, lest we forget. But a relative rarity to have a superstar, a star caliber player in Atlanta. He's been that. He's been the standard bearer for them, but standard bearer to kind of lead you to where? And so, yeah, all that to say, whoever trades for Trae would be on the hook for whatever the next deal is. Good luck figuring out what the right dollar sign is for that, right? What the figure is there, because the Hawks weren't eager to go even on a sub-max contract multiple years, it seems like, because you figure if there was a big number for him out there, it would have gotten done, and it didn't. And so now, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, we talk about new year, new team, people that seem like they're in the market for a new situation. That feels like we're at with Trae Young. I don't know where the new situation is.
Well, the Spurs, I always liked the idea of he and Wemby playing together, because if there's one eraser that you could pair with Trae Young, it is Victor Wembanyama, the 7'7" dude who just swats everything in sight and just scares the bejesus out of everybody. That would seem like a great pairing, but of course they already have De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, and Dylan Harper already over there, so cross them off the list. Would the Miami Heat entice a deal for Trae Young? I don't think so, given that they just completely renovated this and overhauled this offense to be kind of anti-Trae Young, in the sense you're not going to have a guy who has the ball in his hands nonstop, who doesn't really like to play off the ball. He's 6 of 13 this year. It sounds great that he's 46% shooting, Trae Young, on catch and shoot threes this year, but just one per game that he's catching off the pass.
Yeah.
This is a guy who just doesn't want to be the Steph Curry type of running off the ball. He wants the ball in his hands. And I can understand that when you got a really great passer in Trae Young, that you want the ball in his hands. But the problem is he's not a great shooter. He's an okay shooter. And coming into the league kind of as this like next Steph Curry ideal, he hasn't been that. And he's been a very overrated shooter in the NBA. And this year shooting 30% from downtown. So if you're acquiring this dude, you got to kind of acknowledge that he's going to be someone who doesn't want to play off the ball and move around on the offense. And Eric Spoelstra, given the offense that they're doing right now and executing, he doesn't seem like a good fit there. And I know they're always going big game hunting in Miami, trying to get a star player, but that doesn't seem right. The Timberwolves seem like on paper they might be a good fit, but then you look at the contracts and who are you going to put into the deal to get to his number of $40 plus $1 million? The contracts just don't work. If you're going to acquire Trae Young, you better have Rudy Gobert on the team. And that's pretty much, along with Julius Randle, the only option to trade on your cap sheet. So I don't see how the Timberwolves would go after Trae Young. And after that, I'll just say it. I think we're entering the territory of that the Atlanta Hawks will seriously consider waiving him, because I don't see how you can trade him and you have an opportunity here to build around Jalen Johnson and see a scenario in which Trae Young, if they don't find a suitor and the defense is this bad, I kind of see a scenario in which they might just like, all right, Bradley Beal, it happened to Bradley Beal. The Milwaukee Bucks did it with Damian Lillard. Kind of feel like we might be at a situation, an impasse, where they just might cut bait. And that would mean they have to basically stretch his remaining salary, the 2 remaining years, this year and next, the player option that he has for next season. Dan, I might be crazy, but I kind of feel like the Hawks, if they don't find a suitor for Trae Young, I don't think they let this go into next season, because he's going to pick up that player option. I can almost guarantee that. And I just don't see that the Hawks are going to really want to keep this going. The season is going down the tubes. And with Trae Young being 1-8, it's very clear that he is not a winning player in this organization right now. And I think it's a possibility. I'm not saying it's likely, but I think it's a possibility that we have a Bradley Beal or Damian Lillard situation where they just say, we're done with this and we're going to stretch his contract over the next few years.
Yeah, we have to remember my first reaction to that idea. I don't know if you can see, because my eyes popping out of my head, but my first reaction to it was like, it's insane to do that. But I'm maybe still operating with a set of priors of like, you wouldn't stretch that big of a number, right? Like next year, I think it's a $49 million player option for next year. Like it's so much money to eat for no tangible benefit. The counter argument, I suppose, would be the tangible benefit you get is you just get out of the Trae Young business. And so
Yes.
then you no longer have to make the decision on what is the right number, what is the best way to build around him. Can Trae Young be more complementary if our vision of what our future is looks a lot more like Jalen Johnson, big athletic wings everywhere, complementary sort of like ball handling and playmaking by committee rather than the one guy. And so like you erase the chalkboard of those questions and you no longer have to answer them. And that would be worth, and the stretch provision, the way it works for our listeners that might not know, in the collective bargaining agreement, you are able to get rid of a salary on your contract, on your books, by breaking it up for 2 times the remaining length of the deal plus 1 year. So with Trae Young, if they did it did it for the next year, he's got 1 full year left. So you'd be doing it over 3 seasons, 2 times 1 plus 1. And so then it's whatever that remaining salary is. So if it's 49 million, like a 16 and change, whatever, $16.3 million roster, like dead money on your books for 3 years. So that's an impediment to team building. I think that's the idea of like, you maybe shouldn't necessarily want to do this because you can't, like, it's not like you can trade that dead money. It just sits there and then you have less money to spend on your salary cap. But maybe the argument for that perspective from the Hawks is like, that's less of an impediment than Trae Young, even at a sub-max number, when we don't feel like we can field a winning roster with him at the heart of it. which is an awfully harsh evaluation to arrive at for a player who has, made all-star teams, been in the all-NBA conversation, been part of the heights of the last handful of years in Atlanta when they did make it to the conference finals. It's just that's a long time ago now, and we haven't seen a whole lot of evidence that this team with Trae Young at the heart of it can be better than a play-in team since then. And so, yeah, my immediate reaction is like, well, that's an unthinkable spot to arrive at. But in this new NBA, under the new collective bargaining agreement, with the apron set up the way that it is, with the salaries skyrocketing the way they are, maybe it's no longer as unthinkable as I'm thinking it is.
Yeah, I think once Luka Doncic gets traded for Anthony Davis at the deadline, the unthinkable
all bets are off.
Yeah, all bets are off. I mean, we would have thought that waiving Bradley Beal with his no trade clause, you would find ways to figure out a deal there, but no, they decided to waive him, and we all thought it was insane to think that the Milwaukee Bucks would ever consider waiving Damian Lillard even after the Achilles tear. That was such a surprise, and here you have a situation where I feel like the Atlanta Hawks have floated him or tried to move him or figure out a way to find a suitor for Trae Young for a while now, it seems like. But you know what's also absurd is 126. That is such an alarming figure that a team that has Dyson Daniels on it and like other good defenders have been just hemorrhaging that kind of number of points, 126 points every 100. It's absurd. Another stat here on Trae Young's defense, even though he's been hit on guys like Isaac Okoro or just basically like role players, he has allowed 54 of 100 field goal attempts when he is the defender. And a lot of those are 3-pointers. The effective field goal percentage on Trae Young's opponent is 62%, which is also the effective field goal percentage of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So even when he's being hid on all of these role players, they're scoring at a rate that is equivalent to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the reigning MVP and presumptive MVP now that Nikola Jokic is out. So, dude, this is... I know it sounds absurd on its surface, but the Trae Young... I don't know if you call it an experiment at this point, but they're trying so hard to hide him defensively and they just can't do it. And so I don't know. We'll see what happens with Trae Young. I guess, is it the Kings? Is that the only, and all of these scenarios when you're like, which team would take on this huge risk and question mark? You kind of end up at the Sacramento Kings eventually, don't you? Dan?
They could use a point guard, right? I mean, we've established that. Maybe this next point guard is the one that gets them where they want to go. But yeah, what a mess! What a mess all around. Yeah,
let's do it. Get it done.
Yep. Swap them around. Yeah, it's all, and there is a point where you're like, is it just everybody looking around and going like, my problem for your problem? I don't know. Like the best that we can sort of figure out. It might not. I'm sure everybody's sort of like grinding their teeth and holding their nose and making those calls, but that might be what where we wind up. Some of these deals that were like signed on the old system and cycled onto the new system are a little bit tougher to figure out the landing spots for, especially when the players aren't playing up to the money or not being able to be on the court. So, interesting times and maybe some weird ones ahead as we get into the new year.